Welcome to Seat at the Table, the show where we talk about how to earn you a seat at the table. And we don't think it's just your technical skills, those will get you in the room, but it's your soft skills and your leadership acumen that will earn you a seat and keep you a seat. And I'm happy to be part of this Wait in InfoSec series. And we brought two powerhouse CISOs to have a conversation that hasn't been had but needs to be had. We're going to talk about how to grow your own unicorns. That means investing in your talent and helping develop the specific skill sets and focus areas that you need within your organization. On the show, we have Tyler Young and Arthur Dean. Arthur, Tyler, please introduce yourself. Let's start with you, Tyler.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thanks for the intro, Jared. So I'm Tyler Young, Chief Information Security Officer at Big ID. I've been here for 2 years, responsible with building a really robust product security program focused on as we're building products that they're secure. Prior to this, I spent about 5 years at Relativity, where I helped scale and build out the security program. Prior to that, spent some time at Zurich Insurance leading digital forensic investigations. Before that, I was doing some DFIR consulting work. And prior to that, I was working with the Department of Homeland Security doing some forensics.
Awesome. Tyler, welcome to the show. Can't wait to have this conversation with you. Arthur, please share your background.
Yeah, Jarek, good to be here. Thanks for having me. So my name is Arthur Dean, Chief Information Security Officer for Amazon Health Services. So I lead all of the security practices for our growing healthcare business. I've only been here for 5 months, but prior to that, I was CISO for Capital One's card business. And then before that, a host of various roles around the industry. Started my career as a security engineer and kind of pivoted through forensics with the Department of Defense and intelligence community, moved into risk management and some of the less technical kind of governance and leadership kind of roles with FedRAMP and some other areas. Did consulting with Big Four, did big tech before coming back to Amazon. I was at AWS, spent some time a couple of years at Google as well. I love to teach. So we talk about building our careers and such, and growing unicorns. So I'm an adjunct professor at American University, and I also happen to just write books when I find time. So good to be here.
I like how you said write books when I find time. So first of all, a lot of us have some similar backgrounds. I'll just put it out there. This is a group of millennial CISOs that are having a conversation, number one. And one of the things that's similar in our backgrounds and maybe some other generations are, we've been to a lot of different places. And we're going to actually talk about that at some point in this conversation about retention and how talent development may or may not impact retention. But let's hop right into some of the other questions that we want to talk about. So first, we're talking about talent. Talent requires an investment. How do you communicate the value of investing in a cyber team and the specific development of your team to your non-technical stakeholders? Let's start with you, Arthur.
Yeah. So I find like most people speak some form of risk management. Like I mentioned, my background has cyber risk management in it, but even when I'm talking to non-technical audiences about anything, like I just find their flavor of risk management and speak that language. So if you're talking about your enterprise risk management team, who may not always be technical, but they're always finding and identifying what could go wrong, loss prevention, things like that. Maybe they're thinking about BCP and disaster recovery from a business perspective. Either way, it's like really easy for me to just sit back, think about, okay, well, if there's something you're worried about that could go wrong, there's probably a connection to cybersecurity. So if it's BCP, it's easy for me to say, well, one of our third parties has a ransomware event that takes them offline. We need to have teams who can ask the right questions, do the right analysis to find those risks before they come to fruition. That's all training. Another angle that I find pretty helpful, and I've worked a lot in my career in regulated spaces, financial services, now healthcare, government. So regulatory and compliance, often a big risk driver. Like I said, I've made it a career doing security at regulated entities. If I'm talking to legal, compliance, or really anyone in the business, HIPAA, PCI, GDPR, you name it, they're all very compelling drivers to having a really well-trained security team. And then when all of that fails, everyone likes to talk about money, right? Like that's a driver. and I've seen some light bulbs go off when I pull out data describing the financial impact of breaches and demonstrate the return of impact on security training. So it's often a challenge for us as CISOs to demonstrate the value that our teams bring, because we're trying to prove a negative. Like, if we don't get breached, if we don't get attacked, like, that's the value. We're doing good things. But it's easy, unfortunately, because our industry just has so many negative stories to tell, to pull those stories and say, well, hey, like, this training may cost you 100K, but it probably pales in comparison to the amount of financial impact of a breach happening. So like, those are some of the things I think about.
So you make it very clear. Here are all the bad things that can happen. Here's how it impacts the business. This training will help us take the right steps to mitigate that. It's not all tools and technologies and processes. There's this other thing called people. They actually have to run the tools. They actually have to execute the processes, and we need to equip them. That's pretty much what I think I heard.
Exactly.
Tyler, what are your thoughts?
So I think everything that Arthur highlighted is obviously extremely important. Talking in business terms, understanding the ROI, and specifically, being at a SaaS security company. Another thing that we focus on with training and development is the competitive advantage that we could gain from it. So sending security engineers to a new course to learn a new programming language that we could then turn into a product, or we could build a new feature for detection that we can highlight to our customers. So like, we take the business terms, the understanding of the ROI, but then also taking it as a competitive advantage. And like, are we training and bringing in the best security engineers? And then when we bring them in, do they have the tools and the skills to continue to build new products, to continue to build new features, new functions that can go directly back to our, we go back to our, the bottom line and help sales. And so I think it's flipping the security from like that cost center to your competitive advantage that can then turn into a revenue driver for the business as well. And I think that's kind of across the board, regardless of the industry you're in. I just see it from a building product perspective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like the strategy is a combination of kind of what Arthur said of, hey, here are the risks. We need to address the risks. We need to acknowledge the risks. But hey, here are some of the actual benefits. It's not all doom and gloom. We're not just protecting our investment in our enterprise. We're also enabling our enterprise. And we're also differentiating ourselves from our peers in many cases if we do this right and do this the right way. Whether it be sales enablement, accelerating the sales life cycle, or just having a better product altogether. At the end of the day, better people produce better products. So with that in mind, how do you prioritize the individual types of skills and knowledge areas that you want to develop within your teams? Because there's a broad set of skills that we need in cyber. So how do you hone that in and focus on the right areas? Start with you, Tyler.
Yeah, so I think it comes with really so a couple things. Understanding your program and where the gaps are, because I think first and foremost, you're running a business, and at the end of the day, that's what keeps the lights on. That's what keeps people employed. That's what gives people the opportunity to grow in their career. I think so. You balance the business with people's aspirations, career goals, and kind of meet in the middle, where maybe you can do internal training or like more lunch and learn kind of stuff internally to give that, to, scratch the itch, if you will. Somebody, maybe somebody in the GRC team wants to learn more about cloud security. And indirectly, it does help them as they go through audits, as they write policies, as they're building out these really robust frameworks to meet customer demands. But on the surface, like sending somebody to $100,000 training for cloud security and they're in a specific function, maybe that doesn't make the most sense, but there's ways you can get training more like on an in-house basis or more readily available on the internet, things like LinkedIn Learning, some of the other Code Academy type things. So I think like offering that, but then also there's that business aspect where to get certain certifications, you have to have employees at certain levels of skills, whether that's an understanding Kubernetes or cloud security or specific like experiences. And so I think it's kind of giving certain employees that are in certain roles that can drive business, objectives, whether it's a certification, like I mentioned, and then also coupling that with employees' career aspirations. And you have somebody who wants to learn a specific skill and balancing that secondly, but still making sure that they feel heard and it's important, and you're in providing as much support along the way so that they can achieve those goals as well.
Arthur, what do you add to that?
I mean, Tyler covered a lot. So as far as prioritizing skills for my teams, I like to start with like evaluating the threat landscape itself. Like, it's changing often. So like start with some level of threat intelligence. Most companies use some sort of threat intelligence platform or service. That's a great way to just track the trends in cyber threats. I also like to use industry groups like the ISACs. They help identify what the most relevant skills are, and again, the most prevalent threats in any given industry. So that's one thing, like getting a good understanding of where the industry is going, where the threats are. But we touched on it, Tyler mentioned this earlier, aligning with the goals and the strategic objectives of the business that I'm charged with securing. That's another thing. So I always encourage my leaders to focus on the tech roadmaps of each of the businesses that they support. And this, that just really helps ensure that my teams are prioritizing skill development that's aligned with and supporting the actual business needs. And then the third thing that I often think about is, it's not just the tech. Derek, you mentioned in your intro, we spend a lot of time talking about CISP this and OSCP that, and all the technical training and certification, they get the love. And obviously I'm biased because I've written books for those, but I always remember, and I remind my teams, that there's value in the soft skills, like communication, leadership. I need people who can think critically, who can make strategic decisions, who can communicate risks and strategies to all type of audiences, not just the engineers that they work with every day, but the business that they support. So trainings that help people grow their soft skills, I find those stand the test of time, even as the threat landscape continues to evolve. And one thing that I've seen in the past, I've had teams at past companies start Toastmasters clubs to improve presentation skills. And that wasn't even my idea. It was just something I supported like crazy, because I love seeing engineers that are interested in developing and honing their soft skills. The last thing I'll add, it's not only about what skills you're targeting. That's a big part of it. If you're all in on AWS, then sure, we're going to do AWS security training. That's important. But focusing on creating a culture of learning, I think, is the most important thing. So whether it's the cloud security or AI security or whatever comes next, whatever the next hot thing is, having that culture of curiosity and continuous learning, that's what helps ensure that our teams are always learning, always keeping up with that threat landscape that's changing.
So you guys are talking about a few different ways to identify where you need to focus and start to invest. Do you guys develop a skills matrix or anything along those lines? Because there's a few different ways you can develop somebody, right? You can go on the outside and get them training. You can assign them someone internally that has that skill set and let that person help develop them. Or you can have them do some type of, self-training through one of the training modules. If you're a member of SANS, if you're a member of LinkedIn Learning, and gather that information. I'm curious if you look at all of the different ways, or if your primary developmental area is external training, like a SANS training.
Yeah, Tyler, let you jump in.
Yeah, I think we try to focus on the internal trainings and the readily available content before you push an external training course. While those training courses are great, a lot of times when something comes with the certification, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is getting the best skills that they can hone in to both help their career growth and build technical skills or the soft skills. And so I try to if there's an opportunity to, so philosophically, my belief here is that tour of duties and internal type mentorship opportunities is the best way to grow somebody's career. I just know that I got to where I am today not because of training, but because of opportunities that allowed me to fail and succeed in some cases. And I think that you learn more in those opportunities than you'll ever get from a training course. So that's one. I think the other thing, there's a book which is somewhere over here called The Alliance, which focuses specifically on tour of duties and setting contracts for employees. So setting a period of time, because we all know that in tech, generally people stay at a role for 2 to 4 years max. With people hopping around, the best way you can keep people engaged in the business is giving them opportunity to focus on different areas. And so setting up these tour of duty, these contracts where it says for a certain period of time, you'll focus on this skill to build this thing. And after that time, we'll meet we'll review, and we'll see if this is a mutual fit going forward to continue to grow your skills, or if you want to focus on another area. And I'm a big believer in that, and really giving the employee the ability to kind of own their career and have those open and honest conversations.
So I like that. I've worked in really large organizations and really small organizations. In the large organizations, being able to internally grow your own with your own, it makes a lot of sense. In small organizations, you may not have the talent to develop the talent. Also, smaller organizations have to still demonstrate to external organizations that they're doing security well. And one of the things that helps is being able to put acronyms on your resume, right? We have a GCIH, we have a CISSP, and then so forth. So I typically try to combine both. I try to say, okay, before you can move up to the next level, you need to be able to demonstrate in practice, but you have to be able to demonstrate on paper as well. And that way we have that combined, and technically you're making this person more marketable in the future anyways, which most people don't have a problem with.
Yeah, I'll add to that. So definitely both. And Jarek, you mentioned skills matrix, matrices. Those are really helpful, just to start by understanding, like, within the team that I have, who knows what, and who can help like leverage that knowledge to train everybody else. So I'm a big believer in creating micro learning opportunities, brown bags, lunch and learns, having guest speakers at my town halls, things like that, that just expose people to different ideas while they're working. That doesn't take a full week to go somewhere and learn a thing. You can learn something in an hour, and it just has an additive effect. But then also creating learning opportunities within the real work. I love exposing people to challenges that are just outside their experience. So like, professional development isn't only about sitting in a class or taking a boot camp, as much as I do love a good SANS boot camp. It's also like putting people in healthy positions to learn something new on the job.
Absolutely. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that CCSP for Dummies book behind Arthur. That little book that he says he writes, he's the author of that book. He's a very modest guy, but yeah. I also did not even introduce myself at the beginning of this. I'm a CISO as well. I've been doing this for a little while now. And one of the things in my role that I struggle with in the conversations that I'm having often is we are seeing people in security walk out the door. I mean, often. And one of the questions that I've gotten, and I'm assuming you guys have gotten it too, is, well, why do we want to spend, because you said $100,000, Tyler. I don't know what course is $100,000, but
MBA.
I don't want to spend. Oh, MBA. Okay, got you. I don't even want to spend $10,000 on somebody if I think they're going to leave right after they get it. And so that's the question: is, well, do we want to make this investment in somebody that's getting ready to potentially leave after they are now more marketable, as we kind of called out? How do you answer that question, or how do you respond to that when someone says that?
So I don't know that this is the best data point to use, but there's that cartoon that says like if we what if we don't train them and they leave, and the other one is like, well, what if we don't train them and they stay? And so like it's kind of like the dilemma of like, do you give people the opportunity to grow their skills, allow them to stay in the organization and grow, or leave potentially? I mean, it's obviously what's going to happen in cyber and in tech in general. Or do you train them, or don't give them the opportunity for training, and they have skill rot, and potentially they don't continue to develop themselves personally and professionally? And so it's kind of, I think the latter can impact culture as well, which in my opinion is also extremely important when you're building a security team in a program. It's having a good security culture where both at the organization, but both internally on the security team as well. And I think the latter could lead to some toxic culture as well.
Tyler, completely agree. I mean, this is just an industry hazard at this point. In cybersecurity, the lifespan of cyber professionals at any given company is pretty low. Like we just have to accept that risk. I talk about risk management. Like, that's a risk. But like Tyler hit a few really important points in the head. I won't repeat all of that, but honestly, better trained professionals helps the industry is one way to think about it as well. So hopefully they stay. And there's a lot of evidence that people leave when they're not getting development opportunities. But even if they do leave after you give them training, cybersecurity is bigger than just the company that I'm working at. It's an industry challenge that's global in nature. So having better trained professionals hopefully stay at the company that you're leading. But even if they do migrate out, it benefits all of us to have an industry that's stronger with professionals who know what they're doing.
Great point. You keep hearing about this talent gap. I think more and more of us are coming around to the fact that it's not a talent gap, it's a skills gap, which is why entry-level people have a hard time getting in because they don't necessarily have the skills just yet. And it sounds like you're like, hey, you know what? At least within my team, I'm going to do my contribution to closing that skills gap. I was talking to my CFO the other day, and she's a big sports fan, and so I was trying to explain to her why we do some of this, and I use the analogy of free agency. It's like, managing top cyber talent is like managing a pro athlete that's going into free agency next year. Like, you got to make sticking around worthwhile. You have to, make sure that they're being paid what another team would be willing to pay them. You have to make sure that the people that they're working with and the team that they're going to be working around is solid, because they don't want to have to carry a team, but they also want to be around top talent that help them develop and grow. And you kind of have to constantly re-recruit your talent, and training and development is one of the ways that you can do that. Eventually, I always tell my team, if you're really good, I'm going to get you to a point where you're too expensive to keep. And that is the best case scenario, but that'll keep them around for a lot longer if you kind of take that approach. And so she asked me, well, do we have any free agents? All right. And I'm like, well, I think you mean flight risks, but I'm going to view the free agents as the quarterback that we want to keep next year. And yeah, we do have a few, and we need to make some investments in them. And we were able to do that. And so that's the analogy I like to use. But I'm curious if there's, any other way that you guys hammer that point home to whomever you're talking to when you're trying to maybe get an extra pay bump for somebody or whatever it may be.
I mean, I've never used the sports analogy, but I like it. I probably will start using it. But honestly, I think it often comes back to the first question I think it was that we talked about. It really is both like proving out the negative case a little bit and saying like, hey, this is really important because, but then like pulling this thread of it's a competitive industry, and when we have top talent, we have to invest in them. That's really where the value is. Like, I think one of the things that I try to really focus on balancing is investing in the people who are like just squarely those top talent. You mentioned the star QB that you need to retain, but then there's a whole team, a whole roster that makes the team run, and everyone needs a different level of investment. So like investing in the top talent is equally as important as finding the people who have all the capacity and potential in the world, but are not meeting their full potential because they haven't gotten training. And so that's another side of the story as well. It's thinking about like, we got to keep our best talent, the people that are already performing at a high level. But like, we're in an industry that has that skills gap that we just can't afford to squander people that are already committed to working here. We need to invest in them and give them the opportunity to grow their skills and grow their ability to have an impact. And so it really is both sides of the spectrum.
That's a great point. I mean, keeping with the sports analogy, you can't keep the quarterback if he has bad wide receivers to throw to, or if he thinks that the defense isn't solid. He wants to win at the end of the day. And it's not just investing in that person. You have to invest in the supporting cast as well. So I like that approach. Last question, other than you guys, because that's an easy answer, can you kind of share a success story from actually investing in talent? I'll start with you, Tyler.
So I have a couple. So there's one person in particular that has been with me at 3 different companies now. Started as an intern with me at Zurich, and again, a lot of his career growth was not due to training in like the formal sense, but it was really 2 key things: opportunity and the giving somebody the flexibility to fail. I can't stress this enough. Putting somebody in a sink or swim situation where it's learn this skill, learn this technology, with guardrails, obviously. Like, you don't want to throw somebody into the cyber arena, if you will, and they're doing incident response work and have zero idea what they're doing. But putting that person in the room, I think, Arthur, you mentioned this, with really top talent around them so they can continue to learn and be a sponge, is one of the most important things we can do. So giving opportunity plus surrounding them with really good, talented people that they can kind of pick their brains, learn the skills, and learn the right way to do things. For this one person specifically was great. So started as an intern at Zurich, brought him in at Relativity as an intern when he graduated school, and then eventually became a full-time analyst on like the cyber team doing incident response and threat detection work. Was sink or swim. There was two really good people at Relativity that were on my team that focused on threat detection and building out alerts and really like advanced software development type skills. And for the first like 3 months, it was your end goal is to do this thing, and this is the two guys you're going to work with, and this is what they know really well. And it was kind of like thrown to the sink or swim, really, like thrown to the ocean, nothing but learning how to swim. And it came out on the end of it one of the strongest security engineers that I've seen. And a lot of it was that intuition to teach yourself, and a lot of it was extra work that he had to put in and free resources. But he got there, and now he actually is a director with me at Big ID on our cloud security team, leading cloud security. So opportunity surrounding with really great talented people that pushed the envelope and that forced him to become really skilled and really hone in on some of those technical skills that maybe they weren't taught in school.
I love that story. I'm going to resist the temptation to look up a director in Big ID to find out who this individual is. But one thing really stood out to me is you created a psychologically safe environment where he was able to fail and grow from that failure. I'm going to speak to leaders here. Any leader that's watching this, if your team doesn't have occasional failures, they don't feel empowered to try something new, to try to grow, to operate outside the box. Because if you do that, you're going to fail. It is what it is. Ideally, you don't fail the same way twice, but failure is part of the process. If it's not, your team isn't trying hard enough. Back to my regular scheduled program. Arthur, what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I'm going to anonymize mine so you don't do some LinkedIn sneaking. But so actually, there's like a category of success stories that I'm really proud of. So I do a lot of mentoring and coaching, and many of the people that I mentor or coach are from tech backgrounds. They're either already in cyber or some form of engineering, and they're looking to break into cyber, or they're just in tech, period, and want to stay in whatever field they're in. But there's a whole host of people that I've mentored, coached, and otherwise kind of supported over the years that are not in tech. Like they're starting out in business, but they're like, I want to get into cyber. I see there's a skills gap. There's opportunity there. I want to break into that. And there are I'm thinking of at least two people right now that have gone from working as consultants, not in cyber, not in tech, but over the course of a couple of years have grown their careers, whether it's like getting the right certifications or finding the way to break into project management and then leg into cybersecurity and other tech specific things. But anytime I can see somebody that thinks there's this like invisible barrier between them and the industry, and I can help them see like it's really quite approachable. Like there are opportunities and ways you can bridge the gap. Those are the ones that I'm just the most proud of. And so I've been really fortunate to be a part of some great success stories. One specific one that maybe Jared, he can't snoop too much on. There was one of my students actually it was in a graduate course that I was teaching at American. He was an MBA student taking a graduate level cybersecurity governance and risk course. So kind of approachable, but still like enough tech to pique the interest. And like he was one of the students that actually just showed the most interest. And over the course of about a year, like he ended up learning some more and learning more. And now he's actually at a prior employer of mine, doing quite well. But just seeing things like that, and he's in cyber. Seeing things like that and showing people that it's not only like you got to get a computer science degree and then do your master's in information security and get like the CISSP and the GCIH and the GPEN. Like there are multiple ways to get into this industry and be very successful. And those are the ones that I think are just way more interesting or exciting for me because it shows those options.
I love it. And that is a perfect way to end this episode. Tyler, Arthur, thank you all both for sharing your insights, your experiences, and hopefully helping equip other leaders with conversations and tools and tips and approaches to equipping the next generation of cyber warriors, especially the ones within their own teams. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, Jared.